Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. They controlled the galaxy, then a human warship tore their throne apart. For 5 centuries, the Varn Dominion ruled the stars. Their fleets were unmatched, their weapons feared, and their name whispered across galaxies. No species dared to challenge their rule, not since they had crushed the last rebellion in a single week. But peace can make even giants blind. At the edge of their vast empire, near the forgotten border called Sector 0X, a strange signal appeared. It pulsed slowly, without meaning or pattern, like a heartbeat lost in space. A small Varn patrol ship, Valkyr 12, was sent to investigate. The crew never returned, no signal, no escape pods, no signs of a struggle, just silence. "Probably engine failure," said one of the high counselors, waving off the report. Another laughed, "Or maybe they were drunk. Let the repair crews find the wreck." But then it happened again, and again, 3 ships, then 5, then 10 gone. Commander Zurich Varnell, one of the oldest and proudest warriors of the Dominion, frowned at the growing list of missing ships. He didn't laugh like the others, he had seen war in his younger days, and this wasn't natural. Standing tall at the council chamber, his voice was sharp and cold. "We have forgotten how to fear. Something is out there, something that kills without warning, and we call it an engine failure." The council was quiet for a moment, then someone replied, "Do you really believe a primitive race has returned to bite us?" Zurich did not answer, his black eyes stared at the star map blinking slowly, as the border stations vanished one by one. Then came the final straw. Station Vexa Prime, the largest outpost in the Outer Rim, sent a distress signal. It lasted only 2 seconds, 2 seconds long enough to hear screaming, long enough to catch a glimpse of something huge, a shadow moving behind the stars before the signal cut off. The wreckage never floated back, the entire station, with its 20,000 soldiers, was gone. Varn databases searched for a match, they found nothing. Far away, in a sector marked as dead, a cold machine hummed to life deep in the heart of a dark and ancient vessel. Lights flickered, steam hissed through vents, and crayopods began to thaw. TSV Leviathan, a Terran battleship long thought lost, stirred awake. Its AI, Vaunt, scanned the galaxy, her voice echoed inside the steel halls like a whisper. Hostile presence detected near Sol system. Varn Dominion activity confirmed. Initiating protocol genesis. One by one, sleeping humans opened their eyes. Captain Rhea Maddox sat up in her cryopod, coughing and blinking hard. "Where? How long have we been out?" Vanta's voice replied softly, 271 years, 7 months, 12 days. Earth is no longer on the maps." Rhea stepped out of the pod, shivering. Around her, the other crew members were waking too, engineers, tacticians, soldiers. They were part of something old, something secret, a mission buried so deep that even they didn't remember why they were there. But the Leviathan remembered, and now it was awake. Meanwhile, Commander Zurich stood on the bridge of his flagship, Varn Reclaimer, staring into the darkness beyond the border. He had dispatched a small fleet to observe the unknown threat. Even without the council's approval, he needed proof, not rumors. His officer approached with trembling hands holding a new report. "Commander, the fleet is gone, all of them. Not even a signal. It's like they never existed." Zurik's face tightened. "That's impossible." The officer showed him a single audio recording recovered from one of the ships, cut off mid-broadcast. It played once. "It's not a ship. It's not alive, it's a god made of steel," then static. Across the stars, small colonies started whispering stories, stories of a ghost ship, of a war machine older than time, of a single Terran vessel that moved like a shadow and struck like a storm. The galaxy remembered the name human again, but it remembered too late. The Leviathan was coming, and it didn't come in peace. The Varn Dominion had made a mistake, they ignored the early signs, they laughed at the silence. But now, Fear was growing, and Commander Zurich knew it. For the first time in centuries, there was something they couldn't explain, something that didn't fit their order of dominance. In the darkness beyond their borders, something had awakened. Zurich sat alone in his quarters aboard the Varn reclaimer, staring at the final transmission from the lost scout fleet. The image was shaky, almost unreadable, but he could see one thing clearly, a black shape, massive, silent, and covered in strange patterns that shimmered in the stars. It didn't look like any Varn ship, no heat signatures, no drive trails, no comms, just silence. But the destruction it left behind was undeniable. Zurich clenched his fist. His people had ruled for too long without a real enemy. He didn't like this feeling, this weakness. He tapped the comm panel. Begin emergency fleet readiness. I want every warship in the outer ring ready for launch in one cycle. His officers hesitated. Sir, the High Council has not. I don't care. This is no longer about politics, it's about survival. Across the stars, on the edge of the old Sol system, the TSV Leviathan drifted like a silent predator. Inside, its crew had fully awakened. Weapons were online, engines powered up, shields at full strength. Captain Rhea Maddox stood on the bridge, surrounded by glowing panels and cold steel. Her eyes scanned the holographic display of the galaxy, a red mark blinked where the Varn border lay. Hundreds of ships. She turned to Vanta, the ship's eye. What's their position? They've launched 73 warships toward the Sol sector. Most are heavy class, all are Varn Dominion flagships. Rhea smiled coldly. Let them come. She tapped the command console. Prepare the lance. Deep within the Leviathan, a large chamber opened. Inside, it rested a weapon unlike any the galaxy had seen in centuries. The Dark Lance, a weapon designed during humanity's last war. One shot could tear a small moon in half. They had hoped to never use it again, but hope was over. Back on the Varn reclaimer, Zurich watched as his fleet moved into formation. Thousands of ships hovered in neat rows, their blue engines glowing softly. He stood before his captains, addressing them through the bat'leet. We face a shadow, one that kills without warning. But we are Varn, we do not fear shadows. The captain saluted, but there was tension in the air. This was not like past battles. The enemy hadn't spoken, hadn't sent a message, hadn't made a demand. This was different. Suddenly, an alert flashed on the command screen. One of their forward ships had vanished, no explosion, no debris, just gone. Then another, and another. The fleet center began to break, confusion rippling through the ranks. Zurich barked orders, hold formation. Find the source. But by the time the sensors picked it up, it was too late. The Leviathan emerged from the shadows like a ghost, its black hole absorbing all light. It fired once, the Dark Lance launched a stream of antimatter, silent and invisible, but when it struck, it tore through 7 ships in a single pass. Zurich stared in horror as his fleet scattered. That thing, what is it? On the Leviathan, Rhea gave her next order calmly, focus fire on their command structure. No survivors. Dozens of plasma turrets spun and locked onto targets as the ship glided between enemy lines, its shields absorbing the few strikes that landed on the Varn fleet. Panic spread, ships collided, and crews screamed across the channels. Zurich ordered a retreat, but it was chaos. Suddenly, a transmission came through, a voice, human, cold, confident. To the Varn Dominion, your time is over. You ruled through fear, now you will understand it. Zurich recognized the language he had studied in Terran history, back when they were believed extinct. You're supposed to be gone, Rhea's voice replied. You should have left Sol alone. Then the signal ended. Within minutes, 20 ships had fallen. The Leviathan vanished into the black again, using old Earth tech stealth fields that the Varn couldn't detect. They had built ships to dominate, but they had not built ships to hunt. The battle was no longer a war, it was an execution on Varn Prime. The High Council finally saw the truth. Live feeds of the slaughter reached every screen, news anchors whispered about a Terran ghost ship. Citizens panicked, protests began, and the council tried to silence the news, but it was too late. The name, human, spread across the stars once more, and with it, fear. In the final moments of the battle, Zyra's flagship was the last ship still fighting. Smoke filled the bridge, systems failed, and yet he stood firm. He looked into the void, waiting for the final shot. And when it came, it was silent. The Leviathan fired one last time, and the Varn Reclaimer became a star. The Varn Dominion was crumbling. Commander Zurich's flagship, the Varn Reclaimer, was no more. The Leviathan, a ship that had appeared from the darkness of the Sol sector, had turned their world upside down. The Terran warship's attack was swift and brutal. There was no time to escape, no time to regroup. Everything the Varn had built over 500 years was falling apart in a single night. In the ruins of his ship, Zyra's body was thrown against the cold steel of the command deck. His eyes fluttered open, blood dribbling from a cut across his brow. His crew had been wiped out, just like the other ships, only he remained, a broken remnant of the once proud fleet. The Leviathan had torn through everything, and the last thing Zyra remembered was the massive Terran warship glowing like a shadow in the depths of space before it fired the dark lance once more. It was over. Back on the bridge of the TSV Leviathan, Captain Rhea Maddox stood watching the destruction unfold through the main viewport. She had seen battles before, fierce conflicts with unimaginable violence, but this was something else. She had always known the Terran military was powerful, but she never imagined she would see the day when it would be unleashed against the Varn Dominion. She turned to her first officer, Lieutenant Harrow, a sharp-eyed officer who had served alongside her through countless missions. "Is there any sign of resistance?" Rhea asked, her voice low but steady. Harrow checked the readings on his console. "None, Captain. The last Varn ship retreated deep into the void, but they won't last long." Rhea's eyes narrowed. The weight of their actions is sinking in. The Varn were once unbeatable, now they're running from a ghost ship. What does that make us? Harrow glanced over at her with a look of respect, but also uncertainty. "It makes us," he began. Rhea didn't answer immediately, her thoughts drifting back to the old days, back when Earth's forces had been divided, scattered, and weak. But those days were gone. Now, the Terran were strong, and they would never let anyone forget it. "It makes us the reckoning," Rhea finally said. "They broke us before, now we return the favor." Meanwhile, far across the stars, the remaining Varn fleet scrambled to reorganize. What little order had existed in their command structure had been shattered. Without their flagship and without a leader, the Varn had no way of recovering from the loss. Zurich was alive, but he barely clung to the one thing he knew best, his pride. He would not let his people fall so easily. Even if their fleet was lost, even if their empire was crumbling, he could not allow the Varn Dominion to be remembered as the species that was wiped out by a single ship. He pressed his bloodied hand against the communications panel, trying to reconnect with what remained of his fleet. "This is Commander Zurich," his voice came out broken. "All remaining vessels, fall back to Varn Prime. We will regroup and rebuild the few ships still operational in the outer sectors." His command was acknowledged, but deep down, Zurich knew it was a hopeless cause. They were being hunted, they were being destroyed one by one. The Terran warship knew no mercy. Back on the Leviathan, Rhea stood before the viewports once more. The destruction was almost complete, only a few Varn ships remained, scattered and trying desperately to flee to their home world, Varn Prime. But Rhea was not interested in finishing the Varn yet. Not yet, she had something more personal in mind. In the heart of the Varn fleet, a signal flickered through the silence. It was a distress call from the Varn capital world, a plea for help from the Varn High Council. Rhea glanced at Harrow, who raised an eyebrow in surprise. "They're calling for us?" Harrow asked. Rhea grinned, but there was no joy in it. "Not for help, they're trying to make a deal." Back on Varn Prime, the High Council had gathered. They had no fleet, no strength, and no way of facing the Terran menace. But they had one last card to play, their political power. Zurich's voice echoed through the council room, filled with tension and uncertainty. We must give them what they want. The Terrans are not like the others we've crushed. They will not bend, but perhaps we can buy time. We must negotiate. Even as the words left his mouth, Zurich knew the truth. The Terrans didn't want negotiations, they didn't want diplomacy, they wanted vengeance. Back aboard the Leviathan, Rhea made her decision. She turned to Harrow. Set course for Varn Prime. Harrow blinked in surprise. Captain, are you sure? If we go there, we risk everything. Rhea's gaze hardened. We're not just hunting for revenge, we're sending a message. The Leviathan hurtled toward Varn Prime's orbit, the tension in its crew building with every passing second. The Varn High Council had offered to negotiate, but Rhea knew better. They were not interested in surrender, they were simply trying to buy time, hoping to find some way to fight back, but it was too late for that. Captain, we're entering the Varn system, Harrow's voice echoed across the bridge, bringing Rhea out of her thoughts. Rhea stood tall, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the vast expanse before her. The Varn Dominion had ruled the stars for centuries, but today they would see how fragile their empire truly was. Ready all weapons, reorder, her voice was sharp. We will show them that no one is beyond the reach of Terran justice on Varn Prime. The High Council was in disarray. Zurich had failed to rally any meaningful defense, and now the enemy was on their doorstep. Panic spread like wildfire through the council chambers. They're coming, one of the councillors gasped, clutching the edge of the table. What can we do? Zurich stood at the head of the council, trying to maintain his composure despite the desperation building inside him. He knew that no matter what they did, it would not be enough, the Terrans had already proven their might. But the High Council refused to accept defeat, they would not go down without a fight. Prepare the last of our fleet, Zyrak barked. We must defend Varn Prime at all costs. As the Leviathan entered the atmosphere of Varn Prime's orbit, Rhea's ship received its first incoming transmission. It was from the Varn fleet, what remained of it, a feeble attempt at diplomacy. Captain Maddox, you have made your point. We ask that you cease hostilities and allow us to surrender. Rhea smiled coldly. You had your chance, she responded, her voice steady but full of resolve. Now you will face the consequences. A massive Varn fleet appeared on the edge of Varn Prime's orbit, its warships were bristling with weapons. They were determined to protect their home world, even if it meant dying in the attempt. They had underestimated the Terran resolve, and now they would learn the cost of their mistake. Rhea gave the order, and the Leviathan launched into a full assault. The battle was nothing short of chaos. Terran firepower clashed against the desperate defenses of the Varn, explosions lit up the darkness of space as ships tore apart in the blink of an eye. The Leviathan moved through the battlefield like a predator among prey, its weapons firing with precision, cutting through the Varn fleet with brutal efficiency. The Varn ships fought back, but they were no match for Terran might. Each Varn vessel that fell sent a shock wave through the remaining fleet, shaking their resolve. Yet Zurich was not ready to surrender. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Rhea's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair as she watched the unfolding destruction. She had fought countless battles in her career, but this one was different. It wasn't just about victory, it was about sending a message. The Terran were here, and they would not be ignored. The Varn were trying to rally what remained of their fleet, but it was clear there was no hope for them, they were done. The galaxy was on the cusp of a new era. Captain Harrow called out, "We have their flagship in our sights." Rhea nodded. It was time to end this. The Leviathan's engines roared as it surged forward, breaking through the wreckage of the Varn ships. Zyri's flagship, the Varn Reclaimer, was the last hope of the Varn Dominion, but it would not survive the might of the Terran warship. As the Leviathan closed in, the final battle began. Zyra's flagship tried to maneuver, but it was too slow. The Leviathan fired its main weapon, the Dark Lance, and in an instant, the flagship was torn apart. The explosion sent shock waves rippling through the remaining Varn ships. Zurich watched helplessly from the bridge of his broken ship. His last chance at victory had been snuffed out. With the fall of the Varn reclaimer, the Varn fleet scattered. The Terran victory was complete, and the message had been sent. The Varn Dominion, once the dominant power in the galaxy, had been shattered by the might of a single Terran warship. The crew of the Leviathan stood victorious, but Rhea knew that this was only the beginning. The Varn had been defeated, but there were other forces out there, forces that would seek to challenge the Terran, that would learn the same lesson. Back on Varn Prime, Zurich stood alone amidst the wreckage. The galaxy was changing, and he had failed to stop it. The Terrans had come, and now the stars would never be the same. The Varn Dominion was no more, the stars stretched out endlessly beyond the battlefield, and the remnants of the once proud Varn Dominion now floated in silent wreckage. But for Rhea Maddox and her crew aboard the Leviathan, there was no time to rest. The galaxy was vast, and the victory over the Varn was only the first chapter in a much larger story. Rhea stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the view screen as she watched the Varn flagship, the Varn reclaimer, disintegrate into dust, a symbol of the Dominion's fallen empire. There was a quiet in her chest, not of satisfaction, but of something far deeper. This was the price of war, and its consequences would ripple across the stars for generations. "Captain, we've neutralized their fleet," Harrow reported, his voice tinged with awe and exhaustion. "The Varn Dominion has been reduced to nothing." Rhea's fingers brushed lightly against the cold surface of the console before her. A brief pause hung in the air as her mind wrestled with the enormity of what had just transpired. She had seen empires fall before, but never like this. The Varn Dominion had once ruled with an iron fist, their ships a constant presence in every corner of the galaxy, and now they were nothing. "Are we safe?" one of the younger officers, Lieutenant Thorne, asked hesitantly. Rhea turned her head slowly toward him. His usually confident face now wore a mix of uncertainty and fear, not just worry about the immediate aftermath, but the broader question, is this victory really the end, or have we simply awakened something more dangerous? "We're never truly safe," Rhea replied, her voice calm yet laced with hard truth. "But we will always fight. That's what defines us." On Varn Prime, a secret council of the Varn's last remaining leaders had been convened. They had witnessed the fall of their fleet, and though their pride was not entirely broken, they had suffered a crushing defeat. "Yes, but it is not the end," one of the surviving councillors, Von Traz, declared as he stood before the remnants of the council, his eyes burning with hatred. "The Varn might be down, but they will not be out. The galaxy has seen a new challenge arise, and their thirst for dominance has only just begun." His voice was dark with venom. "The Terran have proven they are formidable, but they've only scratched the surface of what the Varn can do. We will rise from the ashes, and when we do, we will not be defeated again." Back aboard the Leviathan, Rhea stared at the tactical display before her. The systems of the Varn had been shattered, their fleet scattered, but this was far from over. The Terran forces were still spread thin across the galaxy, and there were enemies who would learn from the Varn's failure. The message had been sent, but its echoes would draw the attention of powers yet unknown. Suddenly, the sound of an alert rang through the silence of the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving an encrypted transmission, it's from the Federation." Rhea looked up at the officer, an eyebrow raised in curiosity. The Federation had been quiet for so long, mostly focused on their own struggles. Why are they reaching out now, she wondered. "Patch it through." The transmission flickered on the screen, and a familiar face appeared. It was Admiral Darius, a high-ranking officer in the Terran fleet who had served alongside Rhea for many years. His expression was grim, and he wasted no time with pleasantries. "Rhea, I wish I could tell you this was a victory for all of us, but something is coming," he said urgently. "The Varn are just the beginning. We've detected strange signals coming from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. There's something out there, and it's not Vaughn." Rhea's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't over. The victory, as hard-earned as it was, would not be enough to secure peace. "What are we dealing with?" she asked, her voice steady. Darius's face hardened. "We don't know yet, but I fear this will be even worse than the Varn. Prepare your crew, Rhea, the real fight is just beginning." As the transmission cut off, Rhea turned back to the view screen, staring into the endless stars beyond. The Leviathan had just decimated the Varn fleet, but in the distance, something else was stirring. The battle for the future of the galaxy was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. Rhea knew that whatever came next, the Terran would stand ready. They had proven that even the mightiest empires could be broken, but now they would have to face something even darker, something more powerful than the Varn Dominion had ever been. With a quiet sigh, Rhea gave her next command: "Set course for the unknown, the galaxy needs us." The Leviathan shifted direction and began to move into the uncharted darkness. A new chapter in the history of the galaxy was about to begin. The Terran had proven their might, but now they would have to prove that their victory was not a fluke. They were ready for whatever challenges awaited them in the vast, uncertain expanse of space. The stars had just begun to tremble.